Chapter 12. In one of the corners of Dan's room, there was a bike helmet and a bag filled with sports clothes. Dan smiled when he saw the items. "I remember now," he said to Gustavo. "I love bike riding. Dirt bikes, actually." He opened the bag and took out one of his shirts. "Number 4, see?" He put the shirt across his chest and then smelled it. "It's clean. That means I haven't raced in a while." He shrugged, folded the shirt and replaced it in the bag. "Did you win?" Suddenly, as if struck by a strange thought, Dan stared into space. Yes, as a matter of fact, I did, Gustavo. I remember racing every Saturday night. Somewhere. I can't remember where, but I know I won quite a few races." "That sounds great. Anything else? Does the room remind you of anything else?" "No, not particularly. I think I'll remember a lot more when I talk to Fabio. But in the meantime, let's see if we can find out if I have a car or a bank account." Dan turned to the desk and began looking through some of his correspondence. "Aha! There you go. There's a bank statement." He showed it to Gustavo, and it seems that I've got a bit of money in there. Enough to pay you back for all the phone calls and bus passes. He put the statement back in its envelope, then looked around for something else. "I can't see anything about car insurance." He looked up at Gustavo. "Do you think I would recognize it if we went to the garage?" Gustavo chuckled, uncrossing his arms from in front of his chest. "It's like a girl, man. I don't think you're likely to forget your car, even after being knocked over the head." "You're probably right." Dan laughed and took the bank statement from the table again and put it in his pants pocket. "So if I have a car, there must be keys somewhere." "Maybe you've got them in one of the coat pockets in the hallway," Gustavo suggested. "Since you two guys seem to be neat freaks, I wouldn't be surprised your keys are on a hook somewhere." "Good idea." Dan walked out of his room in somewhat of a rush. He was already looking through the pockets of some of the jackets hanging on pegs near the door when Gustavo joined him. "I hate going through Fabio's pockets, but since I don't remember which coat is mine, I'll have to look through every one of them." Gustavo looked around him and went to the kitchen. A moment later he said, "What about these?" He pointed to a set of keys hanging at the corner of the kitchen wall. "Yeah, that's it. Those are my car keys," Dan exclaimed, taking the set off the hook. "See, I've got that little helmet on the keychain." He seemed very pleased to have found something that had reignited another memory. "All right," Solange said when she saw that everyone had finished breakfast and that Malou and the kids had returned from freshening up in the upstairs bathroom. "Why don't we go and see what your book has to tell us?" "Lead the way," Malou replied, "and we'll be right behind you." Once the 5 of them were sitting in the living room, Malou put the book and the key in her lap. "Now remember, Malou," Solange said, "the writing may not be what you expected." "What do you mean?" Malou asked, frowning. "Aren't they going to be tasks to accomplish in order for us to find Dan?" "Maybe, maybe not. You see, the first book was filled with tasks that pertained to virtues that your husband needed to uphold, or lessons that would be useful for him to remember in the future. However, in this instance, you are searching for him, so I would suggest that the book will guide you to finding him." "That makes sense," Stefano remarked. "And what form would these guidelines or tips would take, do you think? Are they all going to be riddles?" Gabby added. "I don't know yet I don't think they'll be difficult to decipher," Solange replied. "But why don't we see what it says?" She smiled at Malou. "Okay, here we go." Malou put the key in the small lock and turned it. They all heard the click and saw the latch being released. Then, with trembling hands, she opened the old volume. The first pages were blank, up to the middle of the book. Gabby and Daniel to one side of her and Stefano on the other, peering down at the first writing. Malou began reading aloud. "Find the right key and you will find the cardinal point of his destination. However, do not stray toward the swells of the ocean of your memories, for they will be wasted errands." And that was it. There was nothing else on that page. The 4 of them were stunned. Perhaps they had expected a straightforward explanation or something more precise, but the 2 sentences were nothing like that. Gabby asked, "May I see the book, Mum?" "Sure, but the rest of the pages are blank." "I know," she said, taking the book from her mother's hands. "How many pages were there before that one?" "Well, why don't you count them if you think it means something?" Daniel said, going down on his knees and crawling in front of his sister. "Yeah, that's what I thought," Gabby said, seemingly excited. "You see, there are 25 blank pages before this one. Maybe Dad's gone 25 years in his past." She looked up. "Would you think that's possible, Miss Solange?" "Absolutely, and it's a very good observation, Gabby. These books always start and stop to the important times in one's life. If there are 25 pages preceding your first writing, it probably means the number 25 describes either a number of days, weeks, months, or years before the important span of time. Malou said, so it would mean 4 things, 25 days, weeks, or months, or years. That's not simple. But it is, Mum, Stefano said. We all remember what we were doing 25 days, or even 25 weeks ago, don't we? He looked at his siblings. Yes, you are all on the right track as far as time span is concerned, Solangi said, after listening to their little discussion patiently. But for now, I think you should focus on what the book told you. Yes, Malou agreed, taking the book back from Gabby. Why don't we write the direction on your notepad, Gabby? Sure, I'll get it. She got up, went to the bureau, opened it and took out the notepad, looking at it, agape. Mum! She screamed. Everyone turned their heads to stare at her. It's already written down, look! She took the notepad to Malou. See, the 2 sentences are already written down. How did that happen? I think our journey has started, Gabby, Malou replied, smiling up at her astonished daughter. I believe you're right, my dear, Solangi said, getting to her feet. And now I think it's time for you to leave and rejoin Damianos. He'll be waiting for you at the edge of the forest. Excited to find his car, Dan couldn't run fast enough down the garage stairwell. Gustavo in tow, Dan finally stopped in front of a Trans Am Turbo. Wow, Gustavo said, staring at the sports car. How old do you think it is? He bent down to look through the window on the passenger's side. It's 6 years old. I remember my father buying it new when I was in high school. It wasn't cheap. Dan stopped. It's gone again. I hate when this happens. He unlocked the driver's side door, sat at the wheel and opened the door for Gustavo. When they were about to reverse out of the parking space, Dan turned the ignition off. Gustavo turned to look at Dan. What's the matter? Did you forget how to drive? Dan shook his head and banged his fists against the wheel. No, Gustavo, but I haven't got a license, have I? Since I lost my wallet when I fell in that clearing, I lost my license too, didn't I? He swore under his breath. You know, it seems like every time I take a step forward, I have to take 2 backward. Okay, I can understand that, Gustavo said reassuringly. But that's not the end of the world now, is it? Besides, you're not the first guy who's lost his license. All we have to do is drive to the DMV and get you a copy until you can get a new one. That's simple, eh? And what if I'm caught between here and the DMV? Well, if you're afraid of getting caught or taking the wrong turn, the only thing I could suggest is for me to drive you to the DMV. You have a license? Dan asked, opening his eyes wide. And you don't have a car? Well, the 2 things are not mutually exclusive, are they? Gustavo said, chuckling. If I had enough money to buy a car, I certainly would have bought one by now. He paused. Anyway, do you want me to drive? Of course I do. Let's see if I can get that copy before the close of day, shall we? I don't think that's going to be possible. I've got an idea it's past 4:30, and these guys don't do overtime. Shit, Dan swore. Now what? Why don't we go back to the shelter, get my bag, and get back here before Mr. Harrison charges us for another night? What do you say? Unless you've changed your mind about me staying with you. Of course not. Dan seemed offended by Gustavo even mentioning this. Are you crazy? I want you to stay with me, as I said. Besides, you've made me a promise that I intend you to keep. Remember? All right then, and yes, I remember, Gustavo replied, getting out of the car to change places with Dan. But what about another bed? Don't sweat the small stuff, Gustavo. You'll sleep in Fabio's bed until we get a second bed in my room, okay? Okay then, let's go. When Solangi closed the door of the old mansion on the 4 of them, she looked up at the ceiling above them. And it's time for us to join them, isn't it? She said almost inaudibly. Going down the hill toward the forest, Malou turned around to look at the old house. I hope when we come back for a final visit, it will be with Dad, she said softly. What was that you said, Mum? Gabby asked. Oh, nothing. I was just hoping Dad will be with us when we get back. He's got to be, Daniel said. Besides, he might be searching for us by now. Somehow I don't think so, Stefano interposed. What makes you say that, son? Malou asked. Oh, it's just that I don't think he can visualize his future where he is, like we can't see our own future right now. Yeah, but if he remembered... No, I think Stefano is right, Gabby. You can't remember things you haven't experienced yet. Malou paused for a moment while they continued walking. But that's just the thing, Mum, Daniel argued. In Dad's case, he has actually experienced everything until 2013, so he might remember things. Why don't we ask Damianos? Malou suggested. Ask me what, dear lady? Their cat asked, appearing before them all of a sudden. I'll never get used to that, Gabby said. I mean, you appearing and disappearing like that. It's scary. Ha ha ha, Damianos laughed. Pay no mind to my laughter, Gabby. I just take pleasure in surprising people.